Well, welcome to Conversations at the Summit, a podcast brought to you by Climb UK. I'm Tanya Arnold.
I went from being an entrepreneur who was enthusiastic, able to sell, bright enough, like all of those elements, and then you go and spend a decade at Mars where you have to influence, but in a completely different way. And so it's actually now that I deal with big retailers, it's possibly the best grounding that I had. The job of an entrepreneur is one, to keep the pace of the team, two, to keep them motivated because it's really miserable when it's not going your way. And your job is to, one, take care of yourself enough that you pull yourself out of those holes, and keep everyone in the team infused when it's not quite clear what's going to happen.
On this episode, we're talking to James Sutherland, the CEO and founder of Autonomo, something where, I guess, shopping meets AI. Alongside me, as ever, is the Climb UK founder, the man behind it all, Gordon Bateman. James, first things first, where do we find you?
So I'm in Germany today, which is where many of our customers are.
Fair to say you travel around a fair amount.
I'm on the road currently about 5 out of 7 days a week. So we've got meeting customers, meeting investors, meeting the team. We've got offices in 3 countries. And so, yeah, always on the road, certainly for now.
Autonomo isn't your first rodeo, though, is it? As a founder, you started pretty young.
Well, yeah, I didn't feel it at the time, but yeah, straight out of university, I set up a company in Madrid, Spain, actually. So it was a magazine for learning English as a second language. And I had left uni with this ambition to travel from San Diego down to Buenos Aires on a motorbike. And I wanted to learn Spanish first. And so I went over to Spain, went over to Madrid, got a job as a language teacher. And it was definitely boring. So myself and a couple of other guys put together some ideas, one an editor, me as the business guy, and we started this magazine called Hot English, Learn with a Laugh. And in a couple of years, we turned that into 680,000 of sales a year. And yeah, so that was my first go. And it was, I come out of a good university and I'd done all of the theory, and then this was the practice. And the practice was you stand at the entrance of the metro and you hand out flyers. That was one of the jobs. And then my other job was going around to the kiosk associations in Barcelona, in Sevilla, and everything in my broken Spanish as it was at the time. And since doing that, I managed to learn fluent Spanish, but go and negotiate with these kiosqueros to get my magazine into the best position in the kiosk so that they could sell it. And so it was great learning. Set that company up. It's still going. I'm not part of it. I think I've got some shares, but I really have nothing to do with it apart from as friends of the guys who still run it. And then I came back to the UK kind of under my dad's orders. He was like, get a proper job. I was like, Dad, I'm boring it here. Like, as a 21-year-old or 22-year-old, I was doing everything that I had ever thought was possible. We were getting invites to all the fancy places, all of the nightclubs and things like that. And he was like, come back and get a proper job. So I came back and joined Mars. There was an advert on the Times, or the front page of the Times, when I came back to apply for some program. I did. And they gave me the job a few months later. So that was now many a year ago. Yeah.
Talk me through the process of getting that job at Mars, because that can't have been an easy one.
No, I mean, it was the job of my dreams. Everyone had told me about Mars, the training, like who got in. And so they brought a group of what they felt were the best graduates together. And set scenarios for us. So I think there was 6 of us. I'm still friends with quite a few of the guys from that day, actually. But they would set scenarios. And one of them, we had been on a plane that had crashed into the desert, And as a team, 6 of us had to decide how to get out of there. And I think I thought I knew something about this, and so I was like, "Right, with these, you've got a pint of water, you've got some salt over here, you've got this and that, and in our broken down plane, how do we get out of there alive?" And anyway, I took lead, led the team out, and they called me up that evening and said, "Congratulations, James, incredible, you've got the job. We're offering you more money than I could have imagined at the time." It now seems relatively light, but it was just so amazing. Then they also told me, "But just to let you know, you did also kill everyone." So it wasn't the fact that you can lead and make right decisions was something they were looking for leadership rather than making the right decisions on a plane crash. So
So the job was not about rescuing people then.
it fortunately wasn't. It was about how do you get Mars bars onto shelves of retailers and negotiate Mars bars or pedigree chum at the time.
So what did you learn from, in quotes, a real job?
I learned that the way that you get things done in a big company is very different from how you get things done in a small company. If we consider Autonomo as we have to move faster than the incumbents. We have to move faster than anyone else out there by solving shoppers' problems and by solving retailers' problems. That's our modus operandi. Every single thing must be done quickly and to the best of our ability, and we launch and promote quickly. Whereas in Mars, it was about gathering consensus. It was about presenting big pitch decks. It was about presenting summaries. It was about communicating and informing. It was about making sure that prior to meetings, you would garner make sure that everyone was aligned. You would almost do the meeting like 5 times before you do the meeting. Once you get to the meeting, then there's no surprises, no secrets. It was really useful because you effectively I went from being an entrepreneur who was enthusiastic, able to sell, bright enough, like all of those elements, and then you go and spend a decade at Mars where you have to influence, but in a completely different way. And so it's actually, now that I deal with big retailers, it's possibly the best grounding that I had. So my job there was project management, sales, marketing, and various things. So
But a lot of people work in big corporates, don't they? And they're very good at that negotiating with internally. Something in your brain must have triggered at some point. Think, I can use this knowledge to go the other side of the fence. Was there a light on moment when that happened, or was that a natural progression in your mind as well?
So I knew where I found that energy. I knew that I liked the creative side of things. I knew that I didn't like following a process, A, then B, then C, then D. My brain doesn't work like that. I have an idea of what it should be, and then I work in retrospect, but it's not a straight line. And so I left Mars when my boss left Mars. So she went over to become a MD of a sports nutrition company, and I joined, and she needed someone in marketing and strategy, and I came across there. And so I guess it was an easy step out. And there we went from being a multi-billion-dollar organization to being, I think we were 110 million, something like that. So relatively small. You could have an immediate impact. But it was still big enough. And actually, I probably take some great learnings of what not to do by going from big Mars. This is how we do things. This is the playbook by marketing. This is how we build kind of mental availability, as we would describe it. When you think of a quick snack, you think of a Mars bar. That's what we were trying to get to. And so we took that into this sports nutrition company, but it was a very structured, rigid way that it has to be in Mars. And so we would come in, she and I and a few other people, and put these processes in place for how do you innovate in a company with a Mars playbook. And we just took the joy out of it. Where you've got a great R&D guy who has a new supplier who comes in, who throws in, he's like, what about this? And he lights a match and everything explodes and and he bowls out and he's like, I've got the great idea. And instead of saying, brilliant, let's get it to market, let's take it to a handful of shops, we would say, great, put that into a spreadsheet and present it to us in the next quarter. And it just kills that like entrepreneurial vibe. And of course, it's a big enough business, but I don't think we certainly weren't doing the best things for that business at the time.
So, where did the love of AI come from? Where did that interest start?
After Harvard, I was building a big food factory, spending about €1 million a week. And we were putting in huge production lines, food factory, huge production lines. We were building hermetically sealed parts of it and building the whole process. And we were spending so much money for what was marginal gains. So maybe 20-25% better than what would have existed 20 years before. But which in that field allows you to compete aggressively on price and really gain market share. But it always had a maximum capacity. You could only ever take the factory to 93% of its capacity before it starts creaking at the seams. And so at that stage, this was 2016, I had got an understanding of really the broader aspects of business, finance and accounting and psychology and winning customers and product development. And I realized that AI, and it seems crazy now because it's 9 years ago, but at the time it felt like now's the time. If we don't do it now, you've missed it. And this was 9 years ago. And so I realized that 20% that we were spending many millions on, many tens of millions on, I could achieve that 20% in a week with AI. And so that was the realization that in that factory, I could improve things by 20% through using AI, and I could do it in the logistics, and I could do it in the supermarket, and it was just that realization that the world was about to change. I don't even know why I thought it was. I don't know what it was that made me think like now. It seems so long ago, and AI was in its nascency. I don't know what it was, whether I read an article or whether we did a business case on it. I don't know. But anyway, I knew that it was the future, and I wanted to get into it. I had this experience of food, retail, and I felt that it was, big industries, big, hairy, ugly, kind of basic industry. How do you take a product from a food factory, or how do you take raw materials from around the world, bring it into a factory, blend it into something, ship it out to a warehouse, put it onto the shelves, get the customer to buy it and take it home, put it in the cupboard? And how can you simplify that process? How can you improve it? And so I guess there was something in my mind that knew this was going to be big. And of course it is now.
I think one of the things that from knowing you is that blend of creativity and that passion, not to just be a process junkie, but that natural equal blend of analytics and looking at not just going off on a bit of a whim like some entrepreneurs would do, but having the data behind it. And again, in just how you've described what you did, numbers dropping out of there, albeit they're rounded up, but numbers dropping out there all the time. I think to me, that's probably where you see it's that the thing again when we've talked previously at Climb last year and other events is that you analyze what the problem is and you're always looking for a solution. I think that's one thing I see in you.
Yeah, certainly that's where the joy comes from. So in what we do now, we serve tens of thousands of customers every single day through our retail partners. And the impact that we can have on single shop, I think this probably goes back to the Mars days, where your mindset is you have to negotiate with the retailer in order so that they can make their margin, you make your margin, and that's part of the negotiating process. But actually, at Mars, your mind was always on the end customer. How do you surface that need? How do you understand their motivations? How do you meet that requirement? How do you present your product in the best possible way so that they feel, whether it's a pack of Maltesers or a Whisker's cat food, how do you present it in the way that is the right thing to do for the shopper? And I think that that's probably now in my DNA. So while I don't work with shoppers, we don't serve shoppers directly, the pleasure that I get from serving customers well is really, really, really fun. And when you do get down to the store, and I spend a lot of time in the stores just watching, um, seeing what we can improve, seeing how the technology, seeing the entrance, seeing the exit, seeing the, the joy, and speaking to customers as well, seeing the impact that we can have on people's lives, that they go shopping once every 2-3 days to pick up the pint of milk, or crisps, or a few Heinekens, or whatever they may be out for. And the role that you can play in their lives can be hugely impactful. There was one lady, I don't know how many times
We
this
need
has
you to
happened.
explain exactly what Autonomo is, James. We've sort of jumped on to stores, but you've never actually explained what it is.
Okay. Autonomo build computer vision AI software that allows a retail store to operate with fewer or no people, which allows a retailer to open many, many more stores, small clusters of stores, into small towns, villages, residential areas that previously wouldn't have been profitable. So if you close your eyes and think back to when there were corner stores, many more corner stores, that's kind of what we're building. We're building the ability for Tesco's or Morrison's, or our other bakeries, or fresh fruit stalls, or to be able to build the hyperlocal stores in residential areas in a very profitable way, and have them open 24/7. So the technology, or how you experience that as a customer, is you tap your card to open a gate, put it in your pocket, you grab a banana, grab a sandwich, grab a Coke, walk out. With the card that you tap in with, we use computer vision, network of cameras in the ceiling that anonymously track you through the store. We match you to the products, and when you leave the store, we process that and charge the card that you walked in with. And so it allows retailers to bring their products much, much closer to where people want them and need them.
It's fascinating because you've used really, really high-edge, sort of futuristic technology, but actually, to a certain extent, going back to that local store, the corner shop. I used to go to the dairy to pick up the milk for my mum, when we came home from school and all the rest of it.
Yeah, indeed. So I think we are going back, but convenience has never really come out of fashion. It was just that the out of town stores suddenly became much, much cheaper for the big supermarkets to operate. And so a Tesco Extra could offer much lower prices because of the way that they were run. You've seen this kind of transition in retail over the decades. It's almost decade by decade, but you would see originally a shop where the owner would walk up a little ladder and walk down the ladder and hand you the product, and from a very personalized journey. And then the supermarket changed to be, you walk in and you served yourself, but you had a greeter at the door. And then it turned into, you just turn up, and then you scan out. And then the discounters came, and then the role of convenience came in. And then now we're taking, and then the hypermarket. And so this kind of trajectory of retail has been changing every decade or so. And the next decade is about autonomous stores. So it's about hyperlocal convenience. It's about good, fair prices. You can get the same prices at a Tesco Extra that you might be able to in an Autonomo powered store. But it means, with the lives that we lead now, which is much more, working from home is obviously much more common. Certainly Mondays and Fridays, you can start to shop and do your core shop in your local area. And so while our stores might be fully autonomous, so fully unmanned, no one's there at all, or it might be, as some of the stores, you have greeters, or community managers, as we call them, who are there from 5 till 7 in the evening, and they represent the community, and they talk about the apples that are fresh and just come from north of the Elbe, or the avocados, or we have kind of hyperlocal suppliers who themselves bring the product, put them on shelves, and we tell them when they need to restock, and we pay them at the end of the month for the product that they've sold. They set the pricing, we take our margin, but it allows little small suppliers with a passion for oat milk or a passion for honey, to be able to bring their products and put it into the local neighborhood. And so we've got a store in Hamburg, and one of the guys who sells honey is a beekeeper. In fact, he doesn't like honey. He likes bees. He loves bees, and he's making honey in Hamburg. And so what he does is he brings his honey along, puts it onto the shelf, and then on a Saturday he comes along in his full-on bee suit with a whole like mask and everything, and he does honey sampling. And so he engages, and he's talking about where the bees are kept, and he's talking about the habitat, and there's a whole story. And he stood out there on the pavement, and on those days honey sells more than the Coca-Colas. And so hopefully in this transition to AI, hopefully we're building a network of hyperlocal stores that represent that community, that allow people to feel a little bit closer, but still offers convenience of 24/7, still offers local brands, still offers Coca-Cola at a price that you're happy to pay. And so I hope that the feel of what Autonomo will have brought in 10 years' time will be one that has added value to the community. And so that would be part of our dream.
And James, tell me this. So you don't appear to me as somebody who comes up with an idea, drops everything and just jumps on it without a shadow, without any real thought, or somebody who analyzes it to a millionth degree before you even start. This obviously started genning as an idea in your mind. Talk us through that journey from that first idea to you going, we're setting up a business.
I knew that there was a huge opportunity. I've been working with supermarkets my whole life. I knew that their mindset was, how do you take this box and put it onto a shelf and sell it as cheaply as possible? How do I buy a Mars bar at 34p instead of 35p or 34.1p? Like, that was the mindset. I knew that that AI was going to have an impact. I've been working in it for 5 years or so, and so I'd got under the skin of what was possible with the technology. And then just a series of crazy things that make no sense. So then became friends with a guy at a big supermarket in Germany. We got on, and he introduced me to another company that had similar computer vision technology. And we pitched them an idea. They weren't right at the time, but it got the juices flowing. You could just see, you were writing the presentation, you're doing the modeling, and you were doing the numbers, and you were thinking about how this would work, and you're like, oh bloody hell, there's something in this. And so then you see the technology coming together, you see the prices coming down, you see AWS, who we were using at the beginning, and now we're using Microsoft. But you see that kind of that completely changing in terms of the cost of being able to operate. You see the shoppers changing, particularly with COVID, but the idea came before COVID. But you see this like hyper local living, and you see convenience, and you see the McKinsey charts, and convenience is tracking up. And it felt like everything was coming together. And so it was an opportunity that had to be jumped on. And then there's a bit of like fairy dust. I phone up my co-founder, who I hadn't known before. He was introduced to me through a mutual friend, and I pitched him the idea. And about 5 minutes later, he'd said yes. And that was my first 6 figures. And a few months later, it appeared that he was like fully into this idea as well. He'd just sold a supermarket for, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say, but for in the billions.
A decent amount of money.
Yeah, significant amount of money. He was the CEO of this business, and he'd been in there for much longer. He'd been drafted in to sell the business, which he had finally done. It took him longer than he expected, but he finally got over the line. And then I pitched him with this idea that he was also passionate about. So loved the hyperlocal story. Knew the potential of AI, had run multi-billion-dollar supermarkets, and so the two of us came together and started to build this company. And that was just one Monday morning. I pitched him about 8 a.m, said yes, and then we got into the business more and more together. He started calling around his network of people. We started bringing in investors from Carrefour and Aldi, and I started bringing in my folk from university, and so we had some big investors come on board at a really early stage, and we ended up with a pool of money that allowed us to be much more ambitious than we at first thought. And we opened up our first store in Hamburg, in a kind of a premium neighborhood area of Hamburg, where we opened our first store. It was called Hoodie, for neighborhood, and that's where we tested everything. So we were scared about so many things. We were scared about GDPR. We were scared about German data privacy. We were scared about what consumers were going to say. We were scared about the pricing. We were scared about theft. We were scared about all of these things that keep you awake at night. And all of them we were able to solve and turn, a small 65 square meter location into like a hyper local kind of grocery store. And so that's how we started. I'm sure that I'll be able to kind of piece it all together, like Steve Jobs says. Like you can, it only makes sense when you look in the rearview mirror. But there's a bit of optimism that you have to be optimistic. You cannot not believe in what you're doing. And then you have to find the signs. And in fact, the two bits are: one, you have to search for the truth. And then the second part is you have to then package the truth in a way that can be easily sold or bought. And those are the jobs that we've been doing now for the last few years.
There is a role that Klein played, though, isn't there? A couple of years ago, a chance meeting
with our friends at River Capital, their AI fund. Yes, we met outside in the plaza on a nice sunny day in Leeds, and I met Martin Sutton, and I gave him the 30-second pitch. So that's the other thing you need to know everything. Like, you need to know how to pitch your company in a succinct, nice, polished manner that doesn't sound like you've done it 1,000 times, even though you have practiced it in the mirror 1,000 times.
So how many slides did you have on your deck there, James, when you pitched to Martin?
There's no. Like, what do you do? What do you do then, James? What do you do, Martin? And so that's it. So there's no slide. Like, people buy people, and in their minds, what I understand was, it's a big market, 6 trillion of kind of grocery trade around the world, but we were looking at Northern Europe as our target market. Big market, ripe. He knew a little bit about it from some of the work that he'd done before, and I came across as somewhat credible at that time. And so they ended up making an investment in Autonomo from that encounter on that sunny day in Leeds, now 2 years ago.
But equally, it wasn't from the yes to the check 10 minutes either, was it? I think that's sometimes what people sometimes underestimate.
No, because it's not an individual. Had it been Martin's own money, it might have been different, but they're investing on behalf of their LPs. So they take other people's money and then they put it into the companies that they feel where there's most return. And so they have a gated process and a process of convincing through a series of ICs, whether this is
You've got to pull him up for this.
I would
get battered for this.
We're not allowed to do jargon. So you've lost me. You're not allowed to do jargon, I'm afraid, James. So if you want to roll back and actually talk to us in English.
I don't know what words okay. An LP.
What's an IC?
So an IC is the meeting where the board of a venture capital company, a VC, says we want to invest or we don't want to invest. And so you've typically got a gated process.
And what were LPs? Because they were going back to their LPs.
LPs are the rich people who put money in. So
Right.
rich people have made all their money and they're sat in their Aston Martin and they don't know what to do and they're getting bored and so they buy a few properties and then they go and spend some time in the Caribbean and then they move on to the third wife and then I've still got, like, what am I going to do? And so then in the UK, this is I don't know too many LPs, but these ain't that's basically, they have money that they don't need, that they're willing to lose, but they can make a huge return on investment with the right success. And so they give someone like River Capital 100,000, 500,000, a million pounds in order to invest on their behalf. And they get the excitement of having invested in these companies like Autonomo. So now serving whatever, 35,000, 35,000 euros we did today.
Wow.
Just these little companies that they can see and follow and get excited by and maybe add value, maybe introduce their friends, maybe use their networks. And so that's what an LP is. They're the guys who give the money to someone like a GP, which is a venture capital company, to invest on their behalf. And so that GP, that venture capital company, then comes and gives money to Autonomo. And for Autonomo, they need to see the kind of stuff that we would have done before in my other businesses. But you build a full financial model, you would build a vision, you would build a team, you would build all the compelling arguments as to why you can take this little idea, this seed, this like little baby, so vulnerable, but with hundreds of thousands of pounds, you can start to see that this grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And it becomes like it grows from being a really vulnerable little baby to a little bit of a toddler. It stumbles and it falls over the place and it holds onto the sofa. And then you take it through that stage, and then you start to be a little boy and you're out playing football and you're running around and you're being a bit boisterous. And then eventually you become a teenager and get into your adult stable life. And that's the journey that these VCs go on. They take it from, depending on where they are, but toddler through, and with an objective of 10xing their money. So for every euro or pound that they invest with us, they want to take 10 out.
So from the yes, and we now understand LPs, and I had to stop that because I'm the one who gets into trouble for using jargon. So we've got the yes verbally or even on concept, and you go through those investment committees where they're checking you out on every finite detail. How long is that process? Or for you, how long was that process, do you think?
It's the longest thing you could ever imagine. Like it's the Nile. It's just so painstaking. And you do a business model and they're like, yeah, look, we've sensor checked it. We've said that your 100% numbers should be 70%. You're like, all right, fine. So what does it tell you? Well, it's all right, actually. Yeah, we think. So then you're through another IC, and then you get to another one, and then you get to another one. I don't know how long it took, but yeah. Was it centuries? I mean, you couldn't measure it in, like, you wouldn't. It seems like such a long process, because you go from seeing a human who's like, I'm in, you can count on my word. This is it. There's a deal. We're going to get this done. And then the reality happens of going through these gated processes. And I don't know how long it takes. Years, ages, centuries, decades. It's just a painful process. So, it is.
We feel your pain, James. It's coming through loud and clear.
It just makes me laugh because that you get companies give all this support, or they get all this support to the yes, and then as soon as they get to the yes, it almost disappears. That's one of my kind of soapboxes at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think as a company, so I understand where they're coming from. They need to do their due diligence. They charge you to do some due diligence, and so they send a pack of people in who don't know what. I'm not talking about River Capital now, but in general, they'll send in a group of people who don't really know too much about your technology. They don't know too much about your business, and they'll kind of scrape and pick around, and then they'll give you a tick or a cross and say your due diligence passes. So that's just another part of the process. And so I understand for them, they have, football managers, they have like high profile individuals who are giving their hard-earned money. It's not like they didn't rob a bank and they just need to clean it. It's like they've hard-earned money that they're investing. They get tax breaks, but they need to put it into the right place. And there aren't that many companies that they invest in. I don't know how many they've invested in since I've known them, but I think it's probably on two hands that the number of deals. It might be less. So they really want to get under the skin, and you as an entrepreneur are trying to give them as much information as you can without like getting bogged down in a particular algorithm, a particular, let's say, like hand recognition algorithm. How does that work? I need to know the hand. So in our business, knowing whose hand it is and where it's going to and the product that it's picking up is really important. So we use a particular algorithm that they use in the NBA to look at the trajectory of the ball as it comes off the basketball player's hands. And you don't want to get down into how does that algorithm compare with another algorithm? And I've got a mate who does algorithms, and he likes this one, and you don't want to get down into that. So you've got to give as much information, and it's never a mate. It's like some expert who has a different reason for liking an alternative algorithm, and it might be because of that. And there's a ton of reasons, but you don't want to go down into as much detail as you can do. You just want to give them the information that they need to know, and so that's. Yeah, it's a painful process, to be honest.
So from Hoodie in Hamburg, how many stores are there? How are you growing?
So we're growing 12% month on month at the moment, which means every year we're tripling. So the last couple of years have been really, really, really fruitful. So we opened that first store, our own store, and we learned really about shopper behavior. We learned about entrance exit. We learned about computer vision algorithms. We learned about different other technologies. We learned about, the peaks and troughs. We learned about theft, and we learned about all of these things. And so then we started selling it. We started selling it to petrol stations. We started selling to bakeries, which is a big thing. So imagine like a kind of a Greggs style thing that are all over the place in Germany, or maybe like a Greggs stroke pret-a-manger style stores, airports, hospitals, convenience stores, so high street, and then residential stores. And we started selling, and so it's been going really, really good. So the customers that we have are opening their second stores and third stores. So we're opening a store more than every month now, which is like impossible to imagine even 12 months ago that was even achievable. Like, it's so much work that goes into building a single store. Not that we do the physical building of it, but to build and adapt and get your technology right. So now we're into this rhythm that is incredibly painful. In fact, I would be lying if this was an easy process. Opening a store is an arm wrestle. It's a boxing glove. In fact, it's no boxing glove. It's bare knuckle. But you do it, and you get better and better and better. And so we started the first store. I think it took us 6 months. The next store took us 13 weeks, then 8 weeks, then 5 weeks, then 3 weeks, now 2 weeks. And so you just see that you just get better. It's not that it gets easier, you just get faster. And I think there's a bit of a lesson in life there. You just keep grinding it out. And this is maybe coming back to your point, Gordon, before. You can't wait and do all the analysis. Like, you will learn by doing. You need to know enough to be able to do it. But in your first day of trading, you will learn more than in any like computer simulation, any spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet. I love changing the exchange rate, or I love changing some number, and it just, oh wow, look at that. But the world doesn't work like that. The world really doesn't work like that. You have to go there, do it. You have a view in mind. You have an idea. You have a vision, and then your job is to go and execute on that. And that's where all of us, so we're now 34 or 35 people. That's what all of us do every single day. And you do it at pace. You do it at, so that you're deploying, you deploy not straight into production, but you deploy into like a training program of a new algorithm. You see how it performs versus the last one. If it works, then you can turn it on and you can go. And these can be done in a matter of days, but certainly sprints, 2-week sprints. And that's the job of an entrepreneur. The job of an entrepreneur is, 1, to keep the pace of the team, 2, to keep them motivated, because it's really miserable when it's not going your way. And you don't know when you're getting out of this dark tunnel. You don't know when this bog is going to end. You don't know when the rain stops and you're cold and it's miserable and you just want to cry and give up. And your job is to, 1, take care of yourself enough that you pull yourself out of those holes, and keep everyone in the team infused when it's not quite clear what's going to happen, because there are dark days.
So given the rate of growth that you've got at the moment, I mean, it seems like an endless growth pattern. Where are you at now? Where do you hope it's going to be in a few years' time?
Even at the end of this year, we will have exceeded the growth of last year. So our job is about, we measure, or we have a North Star metric. I don't know whether I'm allowed to use that terminology. It came out of a book that we did at university. But the North Star metric is what is the one metric that everyone looks at, that they can see how the job that they do has an impact. And we use GMV, which is gross merchandising value, which is basically sales out. So if a Mars bar costs £1, that would be £1 of GMV. And we use that as a metric because it's the number of stores times by the number of products that are sold out. And if we only measure the number of stores, then you kind of open small stores that may or may not succeed. Whereas if you're measuring GMV, then you're looking at how many shoppers are going to visit it, how busy can it be, how much of an impact are you having on the total industry. And so we use GMV. So at the end of this year, we'll be again far more than 3. If we continue the trajectory that we're on, we'll be market leader in some of the European countries. We'll be entering the UK this year with a recent contract, massive contract for us coming this year. And so you'll start to see us kind of popping up in neighborhoods around the UK, as well as other countries in Northern Europe.
And where's the point where you stop hustling, where you stop having to go and ask people for money?
So I could tell you what the spreadsheet says. My my view is, it's just a function of the speed of adoption. So what we're seeing now from customers is the average age of a shopper in an Autonomo powered store is 59 years old, which is way older than most people would think. It seems like we build this kind of shiny, super sexy AI software, but the reality, like you referred to before, it's just a convenience store. And so we see that generally our shoppers are either younger because they don't have cars and they get around by bikes or walking, or older because they get around by bike or walking or in their local neighborhood. And so you start to kind of skew towards the upper edges of the age profile. And so our job is to make sure that we are ahead of the curve of adoption. We've clearly found product market fit in the sense that shoppers love us. We've got the highest NPS out of any supermarket. So whether you compare with
NPS?
NPS. It's NPS is Net Promoter Score, and Net Promoter Score is a measure of customer satisfaction. And so an NPS is an interview that a third party does when you don't know that they're doing it, in order to measure what customers say about you. And it goes from 1 to 10, 10 being, I wouldn't just recommend this. I'm phoning my friend, I'm phoning my buddy, and like, you've got to get down to this. This is wicked. We're living in the future. This is magic. I don't know how it works. I think there's some kind of voodoo stuff going on here. Get down here, mate. I'm waiting. And that's a 10. and then you go down to one. I would never do this. And so an Autonomo store has the highest NPS, this measure of like how much people love it, higher than any other, higher than a Tesco, higher than an Aldi, an Edeka, a Lidl, a Migros, or whoever, by a factor of 2 on average, which is a measure that there's something that we're doing right that is just bloody good. And our job is to make sure that we're ahead of that. And so to raise money, it's to make sure that we are building the stores in the way that shoppers want them to be made. First of all, shoppers are happy. Secondly, that retailers can make money. They have to make money. They exist to sell your Mars bars and your loaves of bread, but they need to be able to do this in a cost efficient way. And the single biggest challenge from a CEO of a retail chain right now is margin. 85%, McKinsey stat, 85% of CEOs, their biggest problem is margin. How can we help them grow margin or maintain margin while you've got a very complex business to run? So so the first box is tick, shoppers. Second box, can I make you more money? And have I demonstrated that in these different scenarios? And then the last part, is, does the technology work? And so we've been able to demonstrate, 1, shoppers, yes. 2, retailers, yes. They're opening second stores, third stores, etc. And the technology is working. So that's how we define product market fit, and that's why we're raising money to just stay ahead of the adoption curve. People buy an Autonomo store for a few different reasons. 1, because they can't find staff. So it could be that they're in the north part of Scotland, and you need local stores to serve the local communities, but there's not enough of them, and there's not a Tesco, and it's not worthwhile a Tesco opening. But you can have a store like this that serves the local community in the winter, and then in the summer it's packed, and you can't serve enough people. You've got a queue running outside, and it just doesn't work. Whereas with an Autonomo store, there's no limit to the number of people. We can serve a person in 14 seconds, or 9 seconds actually, but 14 seconds. You walk in, if you know what you want, walk in, grab a Red Bull, and walk out. It's as simple as that. And so the first reason that people buy an Autonomo store is you can't find the staff to be able to serve the people at the time that you need to serve them. And the second is really around theft. So how can you manage a store in the same way? Theft is now £1 billion problem in the UK. How can you help manage the theft problem for the staff inside who are feeling threatened and uncomfortable as people are just walking in, ripping products off the shelf and walking out?
Well, James, I look forward to trying out an autonomous store in the UK soon. Good luck with it all, and thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Join us again for more conversations at the summit.